Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading White Women Get Ready, How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change. This is a book that I am reading for my own process of deconstructing the delusion of white supremacy, and if you would like to read along, you can get copies here. White Wifely Privilege. I've been working on bringing love to the spaces in which I tend to blame, which has allowed me to access a new level of compassion for our mothers and for myself. Through my own 10-year journey of engagement, marriage, separation, and divorce, I got to experience a fraction of the specific pressures put on married and mothering white women. I'm grateful for these experiences because it has helped me bring a level of humility and understanding as to why our mothers have so often chosen silence and deferred to the status quo. It has also made me question my own arrogance in thinking I could pick and choose the aspects of marriage that worked for me, that I could be exempt from the ways it didn't. Even with my aversion to the patriarchal structure of marriage, part of me still thought that with hard work and good intentions, we could be the exception. As much as it hurts to admit, my internalized mistress/mother/damsel/savior had me out here thinking I could absorb the benefits of whiteness and none of its costs. And let's be honest, there were many benefits to being married to a white man. Our first year of marriage had its emotional ebbs and flows, but unlike many young newlyweds, finances were not a main stressor for us. A few months before the wedding, my partner found a full-time nonprofit tech job with benefits and opportunity for advancement. I also found paid work via that very part-time gig as a teaching artist. While we spent most of our marriage dependent on his earnings, neither one of us alone would have been able to live off mine. His access to a livable wage as a cis white man in tech was why we were able to get a loan and buy a house during our first year of marriage. His paid work paid off my student loans and allowed me to secure new ones. His stable and rising income meant I could make art every day, access birth control, attend graduate school, and take on one very large-scale community organizing public art project, which ultimately facilitated me in getting my first full-time livable wage job. I had never cared about earning money, but I also hadn't really had to. There is a both and here that feels important because on one hand, I feel quite Mennonite humble about my anti-capitalist values. I'm proud of the ways I have chosen work and life paths that align with those values. When faced with the financial insecurity of the unknown, in leaving my job, in leaving my marriage, I have opted to take risks that felt right in my soul rather than hold onto a fear of scarcity and material benefits. With the whole Mennonite being in the world but not of it indoctrination, I've been suspicious of private property for a long time. When gaining access to property and a large sum of money, I opted to share it. On my best days, I know my worth could never come from the underrated price that gets put on my labor. My labor, I've told myself, is for things beyond the status quo. At the same time, it's worth considering how I so easily and preemptively opted out of the money game. As an artist and organizer whose work is critical of systems and institutions, sure, I never expected those same systems to legitimize my work. I've had little to no expectation that someone would purchase my hand-embroidered money pillows criticizing U.S. foreign policy, especially at the actual cost of hours upon hours of skilled handiwork. And also, much more obvious to me now, having a white middle-class family and a white college-educated cis man husband who were invested in, or at least willing to play, the money game meant I didn't have to do so in order to survive. Other than the year after I graduated from college, when I scraped through on odd jobs and a cheap roommate situation, I had always been propped up by my family, Mennonite institutions, and him. As became clearer to me throughout our marriage, my access was predicated on his. There's a long history of this being so. Within European patriarchy, marriage and divorce mostly fell under the jurisdiction of the church, and before that to the family's discretion. It wasn't until the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s that marriage became seen as a type of contract and divorce became a civil matter. In 17th century Britain, where the law of coverture reigned, it literally took an act of parliament to secure a divorce. The law of coverture merged a woman's legal existence and financial resources with that of her husband, after which all legal and financial matters, owning property, making contracts, child custody, engaging in court proceedings, etc., fell under her husband's purview. Initially, marriages in the American colonies followed British precedent. Yet, as Batalora notes, while American colonists brought with them the patriarchal order of the household that existed in pre-modern England, they also began to invent a new body of crime in the legislation of anti-miscegenation. Such aforementioned laws and others, such as a 1644 law that punished English or freeborn women who married an enslaved man of African descent with her husband's term of enslavement, impeded relationships that took an intimate and consensual form from being legitimized by the community. As mentioned in Chapter 4, built into the invention of legal and fictional white womanhood was a financial incentive for the white men who'd marry them. White women of the 17th and 18th centuries might not have independently owned their own labor, but in exchange for their patriarchal loyalty to white fathers, husbands, and brothers, they had at least the promise of indirect access to legal, state, and financial power, from which their racialized counterparts were excluded. In the 18th century, throughout the South, elite families used marriage to further entrench the racist, classist status quo. Strategic marriages kept land, enslaved people, and political power within elite control, which, according to Brown, ensured their daughters' economic security and release from some of the manual labor that characterized the lives of less wealthy and enslaved women. Or in other words, upper-class married women forfeited their rights for all the material and psychological access that white womanhood could afford. Many of the marital truths and consequences of white womanhood are not that far behind us. Along with winning the right to vote, white women's legal rights increased in the early 20th century. Now, white married women could have property in their name and have citizenship independent of their husbands. But it wasn't until the 1960s that the Supreme Court ensured the marital rights of interracial heterosexual couples. It wasn't until the 1970s that married women could hold credit in their name. Unmarried women weren't eligible. It wasn't until the 1990s that marital rape was illegal in all 50 states. The 2000s that all states had removed anti-miscegenation from all their constitutions. And the 2010s that no-fault divorce was possible in all 50 states. And 2015 that same-sex marriage became legal nationwide. Today, as in centuries past, there are still legal and economic privileges that come with marriage, including tax deductions, inheritance benefits, and increased access to health insurance. Since white people in the U.S. marry at 1.7 times the rate of their black counterparts, those advantages continue disproportionately for those who have been racialized as white. What might I have unknowingly forfeited for the promise of indirect access to legal, state, and financial power that came with institutional marriage? And relatedly, for what was I not prepared? It turns out I am not alone in having felt unprepared. In a 2024 article, personal finance and legal writer Christy Bieber reports that a lack of knowledge about what marriage entails is one of the leading contributing factors to divorce. Factors couples cited included not fully understanding the commitment involved and not being able to cope with new problems, such as changes in their partner. And skip to the very end. Yet, if evangelical Protestants have a higher divorce rate than any other group, and 69% of heterosexual divorces are initiated by women, it's worth questioning the integrity of that protection.